Hey everyone, welcome back to the Improv TX Comedy Network. If this is your first time checking out the podcast network, we appreciate it. Please head over to your favorite podcast app, Spotify, Stitcher, Podbean, or iTunes, and give the Improv TX Comedy Network a like. And just a reminder, the Improv TX Comedy Network is live on YouTube with all your favorite comedians on the improv stage. All links can be found in the description. And with that, on to the podcast. Hey everybody, welcome to the Act Out from Open Mic to the Big Stage. Comedians tell us how stories were made. My name is Doug. Today I'm here with an amazing comedian. This guy has been in the game for a minute. He has a podcast called Back in the Day, which is awesome. His interview style is so personable. Like, you're really good at talking to people. Your comedy is also amazing. You talk about your family. You talk about observational stuff. You're just killing it. You can go check out his clips online on YouTube at Michael Pasvar. Look it up on the YouTubes. You'll find him. Today, our guest is Michael Pasvar.
What's up, man? How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me out.
Hell yeah, dude. This is going to be fun. So I got to ask, I know you've been in the game for a while, but how many years has it been?
That's a loaded question because I started in like 07, 08, and then in 2013, I took about probably 3 years off and then came back in 2016 and been going pretty heavy since then.
Right on.
So we're like at like 12-ish years, maybe 11 and 12, 11, 12-ish.
What was the reason for taking the break?
I just got real busy with life. So my wife was pregnant with our first child. You know, my other career was starting to grow a little bit, and I was really focused on that. And then I was also doing a lot of volunteer work. I was coaching for this youth basketball team out in South Dallas. And so it was just like one of these things where it's like something has to drop off. It wasn't a conscious decision. It wasn't like, hey, you have to stop comedy. It just, that was the thing that stopped. Like I was busy. I was not writing at all. So I wasn't going to open mics at that point. And so it just kind of just stopped happening. Yeah. And at that point it was like, oh, I looked up. I hadn't done it in 3 years. Wow. So, you know, like I was like, oh, okay, I guess you don't do comedy anymore, you know.
But that's cool though that you took the time to actually take care of your home life and take care of everything there. So that's pretty cool. So when you got back in the game, did you go like full force into it, or did you just kind of ease your way back into it?
It was a dipping of the toe a little bit because at that point now I had how old was she? Like 2.5-year-old. And then my wife was now pregnant for the second one. So, and my career was in a good place at that point to where I felt comfortable to where I didn't feel like I needed to work 50, 60 hours a week. Yeah, it was pretty heavy coming back, you know, and once I started doing it, and it took a little while to kind of get that rhythm back. Because, you know, at that point, when you're coming back, you're back to doing only open mics, right? So you're doing 3 5-minute sets. So I remember that first 10-minute set that I did was real rough. You know, I still had jokes, but it was just trying to be able to have the timing, and it's almost like an endurance, right? Like if you haven't ran 2 miles in a few years, you try to go run that 2 miles for the first time, it's not gonna be good. And it was kind of the same thing. I was out of breath on stage, you know, like it was pretty embarrassing.
I'm happy that you came back to the game. I was gonna ask you, what were you like as a kid? Were you kind of a rambunctious kid? Were you the silly kid? Were you shy?
I was shy, and I'm still this way. I'm very shy. Like, I'm not a small talk person. I'm not if I go to a party or whatever and I don't know anyone, I'm not someone that's going to make friends. I'm probably going to sit in a corner by myself. And if someone comes and talks with me, I can carry on a great conversation, but I've always been kind of shy. But with my people and when I'm around people, I'm the class clown. I'm loud. I'm obnoxious. I'm a little bit annoying. You know, I like I know I have kind of a in your face personality. So I kind of wait to bring that out until I'm comfortable around people.
That makes sense. Makes sense. So what was your first comic influence? Who did you see the first time and just really set you off on this path?
Man, you know, I don't know who like my first, you know, like I grew up in the 90s. So, you know, Adam Sandler, Jim Carrey, those type of people were people that I watched more in movies. My first stand-up comedian that I watched where I was like, oh man, I want to try this. When I was in high school, the Pablo Francisco Comedy Central Presents was very popular. And I mean, I watched that thing probably 150 times. Like I had that thing memorized. So that was my first comic that I saw where I was like, man, I want to do comedy. Because I always did some kind of performing. I started performing. I have a degree in theater. I started doing acting when I was like 9 or 10. And so I'd always done some kind of performance in front of people from a very young age. But it wasn't until high school, probably maybe junior, senior year, where I saw that Pablo Francisco Comedy Central Presents. And I was like, man, I want to do like I want to do acting. That's great. But I do fine doing like a comic role in a show. But I'd like to try doing actual stand-up comedy.
And what was that? Little Tortilla Boy? Is that
Yep.
what it was?
Little Tortilla Boy. That was where he was like talking about R&B singers, and he was like, "You're silky, you're smooth, you're fine." Yeah.
I still do that to this day. Fine.
Yeah. And then like his roommate, who was like a male stripper or something like that, and he's like talking about shaving his huevos, like
yes.
so, yeah.
Oh my God, that one was good. Comedy Central Presents back in the day was amazing. You're right. That I used to record them on VHS and just watch them back to back to back. Did you do improv at any point? Did you get into that side of the thing?
I didn't ever do it like where I went and took classes or at like a place for improv. I mean, since I have a theater background, I took improv classes like through theater, or we would have, during a section of an acting class, maybe for 3 or 4 weeks, we would do improv. But that's the extent of improv I ever did.
So you never went on stage and did that all comedy, all stand up?
Not in the sense of like, let me go take an improv class. When we would do 4 or 5 week sections of improv, we would do improv like workshops basically, and we would do like the improv games and the improv performances, but just for class. Like it was never anything that I did for actual like paying audience or anything.
But so you were in plays and stuff like that, or were you did commercials, or what you end up doing with acting at such a young age?
So I did a little bit of everything. I did plays, like church plays when I was young. And then once I got into middle school, I started doing theater through the school. And then when I went to high school, I played sports up through freshman year, and then I went to varsity theater, which sounds super lame, and did that. We did 3 or 4 shows a year, and then I got scholarships for college to go to theater. I went to a junior college first, and then I went to OU after that for theater. And while I was in school, I would do, for the summertime, I would do professional theater. I did like a really cheesy musical out in Cisco, Texas. And then for the 2 summers, I worked at Six Flags.
That's right.
Doing the comedy gunfight shows.
Didn't something crazy happen there? On your podcast, you told a great story about, I can't remember, something about the manager disappeared.
Oh, yes.
Got put in prison or something
like
that?
So one of our, so that, I forgot about that. So we did shows. We did like 5 or 6 shows a day. We were in full cowboy garb. And the guy that was in charge, because we always had like a rotating person that was in charge that would like cast the show that day and like have to do paperwork and everything. He left. He's like, "Hey, I'm going to go run an errand real quick." I'm like, "Okay," it's kind of weird. And then I get a call from the owner of our company, because we were a leasing company. We didn't work for Six Flags. We were a production company. And he goes, "Hey, so-and-so is in jail." And I'm like, "What?" Because I was like the assistant manager or whatever. He's like, "So-and-so's in jail. He got arrested when he was running an errand. You guys are going to have to do the remainder of the shows with 3 people. And so I get off the phone. I was like, "Hey, so-and-so just called us. We got to do 3 shows. The last 2 shows, it's a 3-man show. We're going to have to rewrite the show like this.
Wow.
And you're going to have to play this role, and you have to play that, because he's in jail." So and they're like, "What?" And the best thing about it, Doug, man, he didn't change to go home. So he's in full cowboy gear. And not just full cowboy gear, but like in 1890 cowboy gear. Yeah, we were like present day cowboys. It was like 1880s, like Wild Wild West type stuff. So I hope that day. I don't remember because it was many years ago. I hope, because we switched off playing roles. I hope he was like the marshal that day. So he had a marshal badge.
Let me out of here. I'm the marshal.
Yeah.
That's so awesome. I remember I was listening a couple weeks ago, and this is why you got to go listen to the podcast. I went back in the day. Hilarious stories like that. Like, it's just chock full of goodness. It's so great. Well, all right. Yeah, next question. Open mic. I always like to ask this. When you finally decided to do stand-up for the first time, what was that open mic experience like?
So my first open mic was in Oklahoma. Luckily, and this happens for a lot of comics, I had a ton of friends that came. So, I mean, I probably had 15, 20 people that came because I was in college. You need something to do. Everyone's like, "Oh, yeah, you should," always talking about doing comedy. So I had a bunch of people came. It went okay. I mean, it wasn't great at all. I did 5 minutes about my dog. Like, I had all dog jokes.
And so you prepared beforehand.
Yeah. I wrote everything down. And so my experience performing-wise was theater. So I wrote it out like monologue style. Like, I wrote word for word what I was going to say. Like, it was almost like a script. So I didn't wait for any laughs. I just, boom, 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 boom. Terrible timing. I had it all written down. And then, it went okay. And then I didn't understand how open mics worked because I'd never done it, right? So the next time I came, I had all new material again. And I was like, and the next time I came, I had all new material to game. And then I started watching everyone else. And I was like, oh, they're literally doing the same thing pretty much every time they come up. I think it's because they're trying to get these jokes better. And then I realized that, I that was a learning thing for me for sure.
But you must have had a ton of material by that point, because if you just kept
none of it was good. I definitely had zero material. Yeah, I don't think I think I remember the first joke I wrote. It was about my dog had just gotten neutered, right? And so when I was leaving to get him neutered, I dropped I was picking him up from the vet. The assistant lady at the front was like giving me a rundown of the things, like, hey, for the next 2 weeks, he can't do this, 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 and this, and this. And I'm like walking out the door. They're like, oh, yeah, Mr. Pasvar, one more thing. For the next 2 weeks, make sure he doesn't, And I was like, what? And I was like, for the next 2 weeks, make sure he doesn't, And I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, have sex. And I was like, oh, okay. What do you think he is? Like, this isn't a Disney movie. He's not taking on like human being traits. Like, he's not like going out on the bars, like trying to pick up chicks. Like, and so that was like my first joke I ever wrote. That was
pretty good, actually. Yeah, I think you need to bring it back.
I might do it in my next
Maybe the timing wasn't right back then. Yeah. That got me, dude.
Yeah, it got a laugh, but and then I went into all these other jokes about dogs, and like I was so stupid.
I mean, but honestly, it's smart because you're talking about something that people can relate with. Pets is one of the number one key things you can talk about in comedy. Because, if you're trying to relate with an audience, it's dating, food, pets, jobs, you know what I mean? So it's actually really smart to start with that. So what was it like the first time you got to host a gig? You got the call to actually get paid for a job.
That's a cool feeling, because you do a lot of really bad. I mean, I still do bad gigs. You do a lot of bad stuff to where, when you're first starting off and you're doing open mics, most of the time, a lot of the open mics, they're putting the people up front that they know, right? So it doesn't matter when you sign up. You're moving further and further down that list. So there's a lot of nights of you getting there at 7 o'clock in the evening and performing at 12:30. And now there's 3 people left and they're all comics. Yep. So you're basically performing to an empty room. So when you get that first experience of, okay, you're going to host the show, this room is more than it's a Friday night, it's a Saturday night, it's more than likely going to be 75%, 100% full. And every single person there knows they're going to a comedy show, right? Because a lot of times when you perform at these other venues, half the people, more than half the people, whoever's there, they did not even know comedy was going to exist. Yeah. You basically just run their night, right?
I've been to those shows. Yeah. I've been on those shows, yes.
Because you're like, man, I got off work. Me and my friends were going out. We're going to have a couple beers. Maybe we're going to chat. And now there's this dude who's depressed standing on a stage berating me because I won't listen to him. Yeah. Right? So it was a really cool feeling, man. It was a cool experience to get to perform in front of, a paying audience instead of performing in front of no one that wants to listen to you.
Yeah. That'd be wonderful to do that.
and it's funny because you feel like you made it, but you didn't. You haven't made anything.
You're still a glorified open micer at that point.
You're like, oh man, I did it.
Hopefully they book me next week. Yeah. I'm going to crush it. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
So what happened whenever you got the headline finally? Whenever you got that gig? How long were you in the game before that happened?
Well, I got the opportunity to headline a couple of gigs that I was not ready for at all. And honestly, it just was because I knew some people at some different spots that wanted comedy. And then so I got to headline. And I should not have been headline. I should have not been doing more than 15, 20 minutes of material, and I did 45 to an hour.
Oh, wow.
And it was, I filled the time. The people there had a good time, I guess, maybe, but I shouldn't have been up there. Getting to headline these shows that I get to do now, I I don't headline like big, like huge things. All right, let's not act like I have a day job. And so, but the things that I get to do, like on the road, like these little like smaller rooms or like weeknights at the clubs and stuff, that's a really cool feeling. And I really enjoy doing those shows because I like to get to hang out and watch the audience, right? Because you get to experience the audience and you get to experience things. Usually when I'm closing out a show, I'll try to incorporate something that happened in that evening, right? Like, so I experienced, X, Y, and Z happen. Let me bring that up at the very beginning. That way it seems like this is a fresh thing that happened. Everything's not written. Everything's not rehearsed. There's something that's going. So it's a pretty cool feeling, man.
I was going to say, are you good with crowd work then? Did you fill that extra time with crowd work, or how did you?
I had material, just wasn't any good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I should not have been doing any more than 15 minutes of material for people that are paying to be there. And for the amount of money they paid me to do that show, it was still like one of the most amount of money I've ever been paid to do comedy for one show.
Oh, wow.
And it was like, I mean, they had me back. I came back again the next year, but definitely shouldn't have been there at all.
That's awesome, though.
Hey everyone, it's just Stuck jumping in to say thank you so much for checking out the podcast today. If you dig it, please head over to our website at improvtx.com, where you can check out our calendar for all the upcoming shows in Addison, Arlington, Houston, and San Antonio. And don't forget to follow our social media, all links in the description. And with that, back to the podcast.
What is the weirdest thing you ever saw on stage? I love this question.
Oh, man.
Not behind the stage, not behind, like the comedians are crazy, but like the weirdest thing that you saw.
Like that I saw from the audience?
Yeah, audience, or like you saw happen to some other comedian, or.
So I used to be the door guy at Hyenas, which is one of the other clubs in town, one of the long-standing clubs. So I was the door guy at Hyenas Dallas when they first opened. And this might have been the first weekend. I can't remember. And I remember the comic that was there. It was Tom Rhodes. If you're familiar with her, he's amazing. You need to watch his stuff. And he did this joke. This guy everything was fine. He was interrupting. Tom was kind of playing back and forth with him. And out of nowhere, he just storms the stage, right? And the owner of the club comes out of nowhere and puts the dude in a headlock before he gets to the stage. And I don't know where he came from. Like, I don't know where the owner came from because...
Was he even there?
Yeah, I don't know where he came from. Like, he might have been in the back, like in the sound area, and he or maybe was just walking through, because I don't know where he came from, because the guy was probably only... He wasn't first row, but he was probably only second or third row, so that's like 11 feet from the stage, maybe. And he must have felt the guy standing up or something. His instincts kicked in, and he came in and he got him before he got to the stage. And had him in a headlock, got him back down, and that was a pretty interesting thing. And I think that was opening weekend.
Oh, that's nuts.
Yeah.
Hyenas is a wild place. It really is.
It's fun.
That Dallas location, the Fort Worth even more so. But
the Fort Worth location, the current one now is amazing, but they used to have one that was in, I think it was on Houston Street, if my memory serves me right. The way that place was set up, the one currently you go downstairs as well, but this one, you felt like you were in this basement, and it was really cool. They could smoke in it. So you would be on stage and there would just be smoke coming up. You were definitely getting lung cancer, all the smoke that was coming in you. My wife would make me change as soon as I got home because you smelled terrible. Yeah. And the way that place, I think this is what I was told, is that they had mic'd the crowd because people would record audio there a lot. So the crowd was amplified. So when you would make a joke, it boom, and it sounded amazing. So you felt like you were this rock star there. So that was a really cool spot to do comedy at.
What advice do you have for upcoming comedians? People who are just starting out, people who are thinking about doing it for the first time.
Don't be afraid. Try it. I hear this all the time. People will be like, man, people tell me I'm funny. I should really get out there and try comedy. Well, you're lucky you're in DFW because we have a really great scene. And we also have so many opportunities to get on stage. Every single night of the week, you can get on stage. I don't know if there's any open mics on Saturdays, but pretty much every other night, you can get on stage and get on stage multiple times. Go up as much as possible and write. Don't worry if things work out. Don't worry if you feel like you suck. We all suck. I'll bomb probably tomorrow. Things happen. And so just keep doing it. Go up as much as you can. find friends that are also doing comedy. Get like yourself a little comedy friend so you can run ideas by, just go up it's just like anything else in life. You have to do it. The more you do it, the better you get it. I know that sounds so cheesy, but so that's the truth,
Yeah. And the thing is, we only get to practice 5 minutes at a time, 3 minutes at a time. The other thing I always try to remind people, there's a lot of driving. A lot of downtime. It's a lot of time sitting there watching unfunny people say unfunny things. Mm-hmm. And not that we're judgmental. It's just one of those things where we all suck at the beginning.
Well, and honestly, even the comics that are working, they might suck at that open mic too because they're working material.
Right.
That's practice. It's just like anything else you go and watch. You go watch Luca tomorrow and he's trying some new move that he's never done at practice. It's probably going to suck. You know what I mean? And he's one of the best basketball players in the planet right now. So it's not necessarily you're going to an open mic for practice. Get on stage as much as you can. Yes, because you're trying to practice your material, but also because you're trying to practice that comfortableness on stage, right? The more comfortable you get on stage, the more comfortable the audience is going to be with you because you want it to feel like you're watching a person, not some fake thing, right? And so when you get on stage and you're all tense and you're holding the microphone awkwardly and you're doing things like that, all of that comes across and it makes it for a worse and worse experience for an audience member. So if you can do little things like getting comfortable with the mic. You watch so many comics when they're first starting off, they'll do their set, they'll take the mic out of the mic stand, and then they'll just keep the stand in front of them. And now there's a bar in front of your face. Like little things like that. You have people that are playing with the cord, doing different things like that. So getting on stage and just getting yourself familiar with being on stage is extremely helpful.
Yeah, and you're very comfortable on stage.
Thank you.
You come across as though it's so natural. And I watched the video that's like 12 years old that you were in Hyenas.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, wow, he is like killing it. And then the act out, which this is called, you're really good at the act out too.
Thank you.
Making it come across very naturally. So I was very impressed. I was like, because the video was older and then you were kind of just starting in the game.
Yeah, so that might have been if it was a Hyenas clip. Am I wearing like a hat?
Yeah, backwards hat.
I think that was my first full weekend hosting. Yeah. Because the first time I got called to host, so I was a door guy there. They would let me do guest sets on Thursday nights, pretty much almost every Thursday. And then I would do like Friday or Saturday. They'd be like, you want to do 5 minutes or whatever? And there was one Thursday I was there just doing my normal job. And the opener either got in a car wreck or got pulled over or something and wasn't going to make it in time. So they're like, you're opening tonight. And the owner happened to be there that night. And he was like, hey, he's seen me do guest sets. But at that point, I did an opening set, did the announcements, did all the other things you have to do as the host. And he was like, hey, you're on the roster now.
Oh, awesome.
And that was it,
Yeah.
And it was just one of those things.
What is your writing process like? Do you write in your head? Do you write it out on computer, paper?
I do a little bit of all three. So I have a notes app on my phone. Like when things happen, I'll write something down real quick, couple words to help me remember something. And then when I get the time, I'll go back and like in my journal, write more things out. I also do, this is weird. Sometimes I get inspired to write jokes by listening to music. So like a couple of years ago, I added, and I've only done this bit a few times and it goes over well. I don't know why I don't do it more, but I added this bit where I come out to the song that was out real popular in the 90s, that Cash Money Records taking over for the 99 and 2000, right? And I do a whole bit about us the summer listening to that song all the time with my black friend. And like, it's this whole thing about it, right? And so when I was trying to write that bit, I just listened to that song like on repeat for like days. Like I would like at nighttime, I would listen to that song on repeat for like days because I was like trying to like come up with something that I was getting inspired by that actual song of things that reminded me of things from 99, 2000. And I just like wrote, and that's how I wrote that bit, right? So I'll do different things like that where if there's a certain type of music, certain type of mood I'm trying to be in that I want the joke to be, I'll just listen to songs over and over again. Sometimes that inspires me to write bits of things that I'm trying to, I don't know, it's kind of a weird process.
I know, I love that. I love that when comedians actually use the song and then when they get on stage, they quote it and like it's a song that's recognizable or like relatable.
Yeah.
It's so much fun because you're already hitting the jokes. You're getting jokes per minute at that point.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can crush it. So it's so cool. Well, where do you see yourself in the next 5 years? Where do you want to be with this?
If I can get to the point to where I feature regularly at all the clubs and that I get to continue to work one-nighters. I would love to get to the point to where I work clubs on the road, but honestly, like that's a goal, but at the same time, it's not. I mean, I want to be at the point to where I can do comedy and still have my family life. That's more important to me than any comedy thing. It would be great if one day comedy became my full-time job. But if it took me on the road, I wouldn't do it. Because right now, when I do road gigs, usually it's around if I can take my family with me. So, like, I'm at Comics Live in Corpus Christi March 10th and 11th, I believe, or 9th and 10th. And that's spring break. So we're going to go to Corpus Christi for spring break. You know what I mean? Like, or like I'm in West Texas the following week. My wife's family's from West Texas, so we'll go see her parents, stay there for a couple days, and I'll drive and go do the show and come back. So, like, things like that, like, I'm down to do stuff on the road as long as it doesn't, interfere with my family. So my goal is just to keep getting better. I would love to get to the point to where, the clubs here on a weekend, a headliner gets sick and they have to have a fill-in. I'd love to be at that level to where people are calling me for that. I get to do cool stuff to where they'll let me close out shows on weeknights. I'd love to get to the point to where weekends they call me up as well. Yeah, that's kind of my goal right now.
That would rock. So with the podcast, how did that come about? Like, back in the day, you've done quite a few episodes of that now.
Yeah.
How did that start? Like, what was the inspiration for it?
So pandemic was happening, bored out of my mind, working from home. My wife working from home, kids doing school from home. Everything was from home. Comedy was dead. And I had a lot of time on my hands. And I was thinking about just like kind of different ideas for shows, for different things. And one of my friends I love him to death, but he is like the movie character that talks about all the stories from our past. Like every time we get together, he'll tell this one story about something that happened in this football game our senior year that he played in. Like, tell the exact. I mean, like literally, I could tell it word for word. I didn't even play. You know what I mean? Like, I could tell the story word for word as if I was there, right? And so, like, we kind of make fun of him a little bit from it. And I got this idea. I was like, wouldn't it be kind of cool to have like a podcast where people sit around and tell their stories from their glory years, right? And you could change. And at first, it was just going to be 100%. Tell me stories about your greatest athletic achievement. I don't care if it was in third grade, they finally put me in the game and I hit the game-winning shot. I want to know details. I want to know what you were, like what shoes you had on. I want to know what the crowd was like. Was your mom there? Was your dad there? How come you didn't get much playing time? Like, I want to know all the details as if you're telling me a story about how you won a national championship in football, right? Yeah. Or it could be to that level. It could be someone that played college football and they won a national championship. I didn't care what level it was. I just wanted to hear the story from your glory years. And so then as I started kind of coming up with the idea and bouncing it off people were like, well, why would you just stick to one topic? Maybe you do a season about different topics. So what I do now is I have a guest on. I interview them kind of for the first part, just kind of learn the stories about how they became the person they are today. And then I have that one topic that I hit. So season 1 was your greatest athletic achievement. Season 2 was your first job you ever had. And then also told me a story about either getting fired or quitting inappropriately. And then this past season was dating stories. Yeah. So I wanted like real like creepy stories. I only got a handful of them. Dude, the worst part about the dating story one was, and I'm not calling anyone else. Go listen to my podcast and you can hear who I'm calling out, but I won't call them out by name. I had like 2 or 3 people that came on the show. And when I got to the part about the dating stories, they'd be like, well, I didn't really date that much.
Why didn't you say
Just
something?
Just tell me that. Like, I asked you. Like, I told you what, because I would tell them, like, here's the podcast. Do you want to be on it? Like, absolutely. I can do it on this day, this day, and this day. Okay, cool. Most of it is just going to be an interview. You don't need to prepare anything. The one thing I need you to prepare is a story about dating and this, and this, and this. In that moment, the response back to me should have been, I don't really date that much. And I've been like, okay, cool. I'll get you on the next season when we do a different topic. And so I told my producer, the next week, I was like, if one more, because it happened like 3 weeks in a row. I was like, if one more person comes on here and tells me they don't have any stories about dating, I was like, I'm going to like slowly take off my headphones and just leave. Done. Like just leave and like make it real awkward, everything like that. And I said, I don't want you to edit it out. I want you to keep it in there or whatever. And we were laughing. And like, luckily the next people had stories about dating, but You know, so that's kind of the inspiration of the podcast. I love storytelling.
I do too.
I love to tell stories. When I get with my group of friends, we tell stories. If I meet people and I get comfortable with them, I'm going to tell them stories about things that have happened in my life. Because storytelling is the root of everything. That's why we read books. That's why we watch movies. That's why we watch TV shows. We love telling stories. So to me, it was like, this could be a really fun show to listen to people's interesting stories about certain topics.
Yeah. I know. I love storytelling. It's one of my favorite things on this planet. And that's why I liked on this podcast, because we go through the comedy journey on here, but like great stories come out of it. Like you said, the weirdest thing you ever saw on stage, you know?
Yeah.
Seeing the headlock. That's so freaking awesome. What are you going to do for next season, you think, for the storytelling?
So I want to do the most trouble you ever got in.
Oh.
So I want to tell, like, you tell a story, and I usually, the way I've gotten better as the seasons have gone on about getting a little bit deeper with the topic. So I want to do the most trouble you ever got in by your parents, the most trouble you ever got in at school, and then if you've been arrested, that story.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I got stories for you then.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think that'll be fun, man. And from stories, like, other cool things come up, right? So you tell that story, and then I like the way that the podcast has been formatted so much, because oftentimes they'll tell something that reminds me of something I was thinking about, right? And I'll tell a quick story. I try not to tell too many stories on that.
You're really good about that.
Oh, thank you very much.
That's what I said. I love listening to it because you're so personable, but also you can tell you're having a good time and you don't interrupt. And that's one of the biggest pet peeves of mine is, you notice during this, I have not interrupted you very much. It's huge, dude. It's huge. But also as comedians, you want to interject because your brain says, oh, I got a funny tag here, or I got a funny punch here. You want to do it, but I bite my tongue is what I do most of the time.
Yeah, it's hard to kind of sit back and watch, but it's also not about that. Something that was cool that we did as well is I did bonus episodes for each season. So then I had my producer interview me, and then I told my stories from the topic for the Back in the Day.
Oh,
so that
awesome.
way I got that out, right? You know what I mean? Because I was like, I want to tell my stories too. Like, I have fun stories about each one of those. So I did a bonus episode for the seasons as well that I released, after the season was out.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it's hard as a host. You got to, instead, I love when I guest on stuff because I can just be and do whatever I want to do. So it's so much fun. Thank you so much, first of all, Michael, for being here. I appreciate it. Everyone, check out his social media. We got, first, the website, www.michaelpasvar.com, of course. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Make it easy, at Michael Pasvar. Go subscribe, like, comment, do all the stuff you need to do. Find the podcast on YouTube, or it's everywhere, right?
It's everywhere. Spotify, Apple,
Stitcher,
iHeart, all that good stuff.
Yeah, so Back in the Day, got to double down on the day. So Back in the Day, yeah, check it out. So Michael, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, man, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
I appreciate it. And y'all, thank you so much for listening. Remember to support local comedy any way, shape, or form that you can. That was a pan that just dropped. And with that, we will see you on the next one.
And there it is. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast today. If you enjoyed it, please head over to improvtx.com to check out all our upcoming shows at the Addison, Arlington, Houston, and San Antonio clubs. If you like this podcast, you might enjoy the other podcasts on the Improv TX Comedy Network. We have The Act Out. From open mics to the big stage, comedians tell us the story they've made, where I talk to comedians from all over and chat about their journey this far. Also, check out the Black Dog Retro Arcade podcast. Straight from the arcade, we talk about how our favorite games were made. That's right, we're talking all that video game goodness. And finally, we have Quacking Up, a storytelling podcast where we pick suggestions from a hat and tell stories based upon them. Once again, thank you so much for listening. Please check out our social media, all links in the description. And with that, we'll see you on the next one.